I was 23 years old the first time I truly understood what it means to feel watched. Not in a vague, abstract way. Not that uncomfortable feeling you sometimes get walking alone at night. I mean knowing, with absolute certainty, that there was someone else in that building with me. Someone who had no reason to be there, and who knew exactly where not to stand in order to stay invisible. I still work in logistics, but I don't do night shifts anymore. And if you want to know why, this is the answer. I ended up in that job almost by accident, a stock control clerk at a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of the city, one of those massive industrial buildings you see from the highway and never think twice about. Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning. It wasn't a bad job. Repetitive, sure, but straightforward. You scanned incoming parcels, updated the inventory system, checked for discrepancies between what arrived and what the delivery note said. Every now and then you grabbed a terrible coffee from the machine near the locker rooms and waited for time to pass. The warehouse was split into two main sections. Section A, where I usually worked, and Section B on the opposite side of the building, connected by a corridor about 50 meters long. At night there were only a handful of us. Me handling stock control in Section A, 2 or 3 forklift operators mainly working in Section B to get the morning loads ready. Technically, I wasn't alone in the building. In practice, for most of the shift, it felt like I was. That night, the forklift crew was completely focused on an urgent delivery on the other side. Nobody was coming to Section A for hours. They'd told me before the shift started, almost as a warning, keep to yourself tonight. Fine, I'd done it before. Around 1:30 in the morning, while I was updating the register on one of the last pallets to arrive, I heard a noise from the far end of the section. One of those sounds you can't immediately categorize. Not a bang, not a squeak, something in between. Like something heavy shifting a few centimeters across a metal surface. I looked up. The aisles were silent. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they always did. I waited a few seconds, then looked back down at the scanner. Probably a pallet settling. It happens with heavy loads. I went back to work. About half an hour later, the system flagged one of the side-loading doors as open. It wasn't unusual. Those doors sometimes stayed ajar because of a stuck track, or because someone forgot to close them at the end of a shift. Checking them was part of my standard rounds. I walked toward the one the system had flagged. It was on the west side of the building, the least used one. The one that opened onto the secondary yard where nobody came at night. It was open about 20 centimeters. I pressed my palm against the metal surface and pushed. It didn't move. I pushed again, harder this time. Nothing. It stayed exactly where it was, as if there was a weight on the other side holding it in place. Not a mechanical resistance, not the kind of stuck feeling you get when a track is misaligned. Something different. Something that gave slightly under pressure, then returned to the same position. I stood there for a moment with my hand still on the door. Then I let go and stepped back. The door stayed where it was. From the other side, silence. No movement visible through the gap. Just the darkness of the yard and the distant outline of the perimeter fence. I waited 10 seconds, then 10 more. Nothing happened. The track. It's just the stuck track creating that weird resistance. I'd report it to the maintenance supervisor in the morning. For now, I let it go and went back to my workstation. I only understood much later. That resistance was him. He was already inside. He was holding the door shut from the other side while I pushed. About 40 minutes later, the system flagged an anomaly in an aisle I'd already checked at the start of the shift. One parcel showed as out of place, moved 2 positions from its registered location. It could have been a scan error, or someone might have repositioned the pallet without updating the system. I picked up the scanner and went to check. It was aisle 7, the one closest to the west wall, the same wall where the loading door was. I walked along the aisle checking the codes. The shelves were nearly 4 meters tall, packed with cellophane-wrapped pallets. The lighting there was slightly dimmer than the rest of the section. One of the fixtures had a faulty ballast for weeks, throwing off a yellowish, unsteady glow. I reached the end of the aisle, level with the last shelf, and I saw the shoes. 2 men's shoes, dark, with thick rubber soles, perfectly still, sticking out about 20 centimeters past the corner of the last shelf, as if whoever was wearing them was leaning against the wall on the blind side of the aisle. They weren't moving. I froze, scanner in my right hand, heart beating hard but strangely slowly, the way your body slows down when it needs to focus before it acts. I called out, said there was someone there, that they could come out. No answer. The shoes didn't move. I stepped back, slowly, 1 step at a time, without turning my back on the aisle. I was thinking about something they told us during the mandatory safety training when I was hired. The security manager had shown us the layout of the internal surveillance system, the areas that were covered, and almost as a side note, the areas the cameras didn't reach. The blind spots, small zones behind the last shelf in certain aisles, the west side near the loading doors, a stretch of the central corridor. As I backed away, I realized the shoes were positioned exactly in one of those spots. End of aisle 7, blind spot. And the west side loading door, the one with that strange resistance, was maybe 15 meters away. I didn't run. I told myself not to run because running meant making noise, and making noise meant giving away where I was going. I walked fast, as controlled as I could manage, until I reached the central corridor. Then I followed it all the way to Section B. When I saw the forklift operators, something released in my chest. I said only, "There's someone in Section A, in the corner of aisle 7. One of them immediately called the on-call supervisor. Another grabbed a flashlight and said he was coming with me. We went back into Section A together, the three of us. Aisle 7 was empty. The shoes were gone. The west side loading door was wide open, not 20 centimeters ajar anymore, but fully open. We reviewed the external cameras from the security booth. There was a blind spot there too, a shadow zone of about 3 meters right next to the west loading door, just outside the perimeter camera's field of view. Nobody coming out, nobody going in, as if no one had ever been there. The police arrived, inspected the outer perimeter, and found the secondary gate at the back of the building unlocked, the one that was supposed to be locked at night. They didn't find anyone. The following morning, I sat down with the surveillance technician and we went through the internal footage more carefully. There was one frame, just one, from the camera at the entrance to Section A, where a dark shape could be seen moving toward aisle 7. The timestamp was approximately 20 minutes before I went to check the inventory anomaly. 20 minutes in which he had been there, still waiting. The technician asked me how I knew aisle 7 had a blind spot. I told him they'd told us during the safety training. He nodded slowly, without saying anything. Then he asked whether that information was written down somewhere, in some document handed out to staff at the time of hiring. I didn't answer right away. Yes, it was in the training handout, with a map attached. I don't know whether that person worked there, or had worked there before. I'll probably never find out. All I know is that they knew that building better than they should have, and that night, they had chosen exactly the right spots to stay invisible. I handed in my resignation the following week, and sometimes, when I drive past one of those warehouses on the highway, I look away. There are things you only understand afterward. After it's over, after you're safe, after you've had time to put the pieces back together in the right order. In the moment, you don't see the pattern, you only see individual details, and each one seems explainable, seems normal. It's only looking back that you realize they weren't random, that someone had chosen them carefully. I still work at the pharmacy, but since that night, I've asked never to work a shift alone again. I worked as a cashier at a 24-hour pharmacy in a quiet residential neighborhood. It's not the kind of place you associate with danger. The people who come in at night are almost always the same. Parents with feverish children, elderly people who can't sleep, the occasional person with a headache, quick customers, simple requests. The store was small, 3 product aisles, the pharmacy counter at the back, the register by the entrance. At night, the lights dimmed slightly, a company choice, they said, for atmosphere, and the hum of the fluorescents became more noticeable, as if the silence amplified it. The floor was pale linoleum, almost white, and it reflected the light in a way that made everything look slightly unreal. One of those places that seems normal during the day and like something else entirely at night. That night there were 2 of us, me at the register and my colleague Marco in the stockroom doing an inventory of products nearing their expiration date. It wasn't a job that required us to be together. He was back there with his scanner and his cart. I managed the front. In practice, for most of the shift, the store was mine. By 3 in the morning, the flow of customers had nearly dried up. I'd restocked the display stand near the register, refilled the leaflet holders, wiped down the counter. I was starting to hope the night would end without incident. She came in around 3:20, a woman, maybe 40, dark hair pulled back, dark jacket. Nothing unusual about her appearance. She walked directly to the counter with the quiet confidence of someone who already knows what they want. She asked for an over-the-counter painkiller, one of the most common ones, nothing requiring a prescription. While I was looking for it on the shelf behind me, she asked if I always work nights. I said yes, smiling. A normal question. People ask it often. She paid in cash, took the box, and left. 30 seconds, maybe less. I didn't think about it again. 20 minutes later, she came back. This time she didn't go to the counter. She stopped at the skincare display stand near the door and started flipping through the products without picking them up. Every now and then she glanced in my direction. Not directly, sideways. The way you look at something when you want to watch it without appearing to. I called Marco on the internal phone and told him quietly there was a strange customer. I couldn't leave the register. The store was open, and she was still inside. Marco said to keep him posted. The woman was still at the display. She had her phone in her hand, tilted slightly toward the interior of the store, not downward, the way you hold it when you're typing. I was looking at her, not out through the window. The counter kept my eyes pointed inward, and whatever was happening on the pavement outside was out of my line of sight from that angle. She was photographing the store. I was almost certain of it, but not certain enough. She came to the register with two products, a mouthwash and a sun cream, a combination that made very little sense at 20 to 4 in the morning, and set them on the counter. Then, with a disarming naturalness, she asked if I was the only one working. Something about that question stopped me. This was the second time she'd come in. She already knew the rhythms of the place. She knew when the flow of customers slowed down, knew that staffing dropped at night, and now she was checking how many people were inside. I said we had 2 more people in the stockroom. A lie, there were only 2 of us total, and that I was about to call one of them out to do a check. She nodded, paid without hurrying, and left again. I called Marco and told him everything. I asked him to come out of the stockroom and stay with me at the counter for a while. He didn't argue. He settled near the register and we stayed quiet for a few minutes, watching the door. Nothing. Nobody came in. After about 20 minutes, Marco said she was probably just a strange late-night customer, that it happened sometimes. Maybe she had trouble sleeping, maybe she was just killing time. He said to call him right away if she came back. Then he went back to the stockroom. I was alone. I told myself he was right. I told myself I was reading too much into a customer who was a bit out of place. 40 minutes passed without anyone coming in. The store was silent. The lights hummed. The linoleum reflected the fluorescent glow in that flat, even light that at that hour of night felt almost artificial. I started to believe I'd overreacted. It was nearly 5 in the morning when the door opened again. It was her. Same jacket, same walk. But this time she didn't stop at the display. She came straight to the counter and sat down on the stool on the other side, the one I kept for elderly customers, as if she owned the place. I texted Marco under the counter. She's back. Come out. I looked up. She was watching me with a half smile, both hands flat on the counter. She asked how old I was. I answered with a question, asked what she was looking for. She smiled again and said she was just making conversation. That long nights wore on her. Then she lowered her voice and said she had a proposal for me. She said she organized private events, exclusive parties, carefully selected guests. She was looking for young, presentable women to work as hostesses. Nothing complicated, just being there, keeping guests entertained. Cash payment that same night. I kept my voice steady. I told her I wasn't interested. Her expression didn't change. She said she understood, that maybe I wanted to think about it. As she spoke, she rose slowly from the stool and walked around the counter. Not from the entrance side, but from the other side. The one with no way out. The one that faced the wall. She moved slowly, as if she were looking for something on the counter, but her eyes stayed on me. I stepped back. She moved forward another half step. Then she reached out and placed her hand on my forearm. A light grip, almost gentle, as if she wanted to stop me. I thought about it often afterward. That grip. How calculated it had been. At that moment, I heard the stockroom door open. Marco came out, saw me standing there with that look on my face, and positioned himself next to me without saying a word. The woman let go of my arm. She looked at Marco, then at me. The half smile held for a second, then disappeared. She straightened up, said quietly that I should think about it, and walked out. Marco waited out the rest of the shift with me without being asked. He stayed out of the stockroom for the remainder of the night, tidying things near the register without asking questions. At 6:15, my shift ended. We left together. The car park on the side of the building was nearly empty. Just my car and Marco's, parked close together under the only working streetlight. As I walked toward mine, I saw something that hadn't been there when I arrived. A dark car parked at an angle at the far end of the lot, outside the marked bays. Engine off, windows tinted. I couldn't tell whether anyone was inside. I got in, locked the door, and waited for Marco to pull out first. I followed him out of the lot. As I turned at the exit, I checked the mirror. The dark car didn't move. I told my manager everything the next day. He looked through the night's footage with me. What he saw changed the reading of the whole story. During the first visit, when the woman had her phone out near the display, the footage clearly showed her framing the interior. The counter, the register, the stockroom entrance. 3 distinct shots in under 2 minutes. During the second visit, while she was talking to me at the counter, There was something I hadn't seen from my angle. On the pavement outside the window, a man had stopped. He'd stood there for the entire duration of the conversation, back to the window, facing the street, as if he were keeping watch. He disappeared 30 seconds before Marco came out of the stockroom. They knew I wasn't alone. They knew how many people were inside because I'd told them myself. Even though I'd lied about the number, I'd confirmed I wasn't the only one. They were waiting for the moment when I'd be truly alone. And when they realized that moment wasn't coming, they left. My manager called the police. They took the footage, noted the descriptions of the woman and the man on the pavement. The dark car in the lot was already gone by the time the officers arrived. No follow-up, no arrests, no identification. The thing I still can't get out of my head is the sequence. The first visit was reconnaissance, to see the place, learn the rhythms, assess me. The second was information gathering. Photograph the interior, check the staffing, post a lookout outside. The third was the real attempt. 3 phases, all planned, all carried out with a composure that frightens me more than any kind of frenzy would. I don't know who that woman was. I don't know who the man outside was. I don't know what would have happened if Marco hadn't come out when he did. If I'd been a second slower answering his message. If he'd stayed in the stockroom 1 minute longer. Those are the questions I go to bed with every night. I still work at that pharmacy, but I never work the front alone anymore. There's always someone with me at the register, not just in the back. And every time a customer comes in twice in the same night, my stomach knows before my head does. I've never been afraid of the dark. I always thought it was an irrational thing. Darkness is just the absence of light. It doesn't change what's there. Whatever is there in daylight too. It's just harder to see. That night I changed my mind. For nearly 2 years, I worked as a parking attendant in a multi-story car park near the hospital. Night shift, 11 in the evening to 7 in the morning. The facility stayed open all night for medical staff and visitors to the emergency wards. It was never completely empty, but between one car and the next, there could be 20 minutes of total silence. My post was a booth on the ground floor, near the main entrance. Glass on 3 sides, I could see the ramps, the entry barrier, and the stretch of road in front of the building. At night, the artificial lighting had that dull orange tint of sodium street lamps, and the shadows between the pillars were sharp and deep. Each level had its own cameras, all connected to a monitor in the booth. In theory, I had eyes everywhere. In practice, I knew perfectly well there were corners the cameras didn't reach. That night, the car park was emptier than usual. A few vehicles belonging to hospital staff on the lower levels, nothing else. I'd already done the walkthrough at the start of the shift, taking the lift to the top, checking for vehicles parked irregularly or anyone in distress, then coming back down. Everything was fine. I settled into the booth with my coffee and my phone, ready to spend the night doing nothing. Around 1 in the morning, a car stopped at the entry barrier. It wasn't unusual. Someone arriving late, a family member coming to visit a patient. I waited for the driver to take a ticket from the automatic dispenser and for the barrier to lift. It didn't. The car sat there for nearly 30 seconds without anyone interacting with the dispenser. Then it reversed slowly and disappeared into the street. Someone who changed their mind. It happens. I noted the time in the log. I did that with any out-of-routine event. It was part of the protocol, and went back to my phone. About half an hour later, I decided to do a second walkthrough. It wasn't in the protocol. One at the start of the shift was enough, but the car park was silent, and moving around helped me stay awake. I took the lift to the 4th floor and walked up the last ramp to the 5th. The 5th was completely empty. No cars, no lights on except the emergency one at the far end. A faint green that made everything look flat and depthless. I was about to turn back when I heard a noise from the level above. The car park was 5 stories. There was no level above the 5th. There was only the roof, technically accessible from the final ramp, but unlit and unsupervised. The noise was footsteps. Quick, sharp, cutting off abruptly. I stood still and listened. Silence. Then nothing. A pigeon, or the wind moving something on the roof. I went back to the lift. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the monitor in the booth went black. Not gradually. All at once. Every camera, simultaneously. Black screen. No signal. I called the management company's out-of-hours number. The operator told me in a bored tone that it was probably a local server issue, and they'd send someone in the morning. It was 2 in the morning, and the cameras of a publicly accessible car park were offline, but the morning was apparently fine. I sat in the booth with the monitor dark and the automatic barrier still working. Anyone could come in without me seeing them arrive on the upper levels. Probably a technical issue. It happens. I spent the next hour with the booth door locked from the inside. Lights on full. Ears tuned to any sound coming from the ramps. Every car that entered made me stand up. Then, around 3:30, Someone knocked on the side window of the booth. From inside the car park. Not from the street outside, from inside, from the ramp side. I held my breath. Then a man stepped up to the glass. 50s, gray coat, tired look. He said he'd lost his ticket and needed to get out on foot for an urgent errand. His tone was normal, almost apologetic. I looked at the monitor. Dark. I had no way of checking whether this man had actually come in earlier by car or had walked in through one of the secondary entrances. Could have been any customer. In a car park next to a hospital, at night, you get people in all kinds of situations. I kept my voice steady and told him I'd open the pedestrian gate. The electric one operated only from my station, but that I'd need to log his exit manually. I asked for his name. He gave it without hesitating. I opened the gate. The man left with a small raise of his hand, almost a wave, and walked toward the street without looking back. I locked up again. I sat down. The monitor was still dark. 10 minutes later, the cameras came back on by themselves. The following morning, when the surveillance technician arrived, I watched the recordings from the blackout period with him. The cameras had been recording even during the outage, on a local buffer separate from the main server. The technician hadn't told me that before, and the overnight operator probably didn't know either. The recordings showed 1 hour and 12 minutes of footage. For the first 20 minutes, nothing. The empty car park, the pillars, the shadows. At minute 23, a figure entered through the secondary access on the 3rd floor. The one cyclists used with the code-operated gate that should have been locked. The figure moved along the perimeter of the level, staying close to the pillars, outside the central field of the cameras. It stopped in the northwest corner of the 3rd floor. One of the blind spots I knew well. It stayed there for 42 minutes. Then it moved again. It came down to the ground floor. It wandered through another level for about 20 minutes, always staying at the edges of the camera's field of view. Then it approached the booth from the car park side, the side window side. It stopped just outside my direct line of sight, leaning against the pillar next to the booth, for about 6 minutes. Then it knocked. It was the man in the gray coat. I watched the footage again to be sure. The figure that had spent 42 minutes in the blind spot on the 3rd floor and the man who had asked me to open the gate were the same person. The technician, after a long silence, asked whether I'd opened the gate. I told him yes. He asked for the name the man had given me. I told him. He checked the database of subscribers and tickets from that night. The name didn't appear anywhere. No vehicle registered to that name. No ticket issued. The name was false. The management company called the police. They brought the recordings, both the main server footage and the local buffer. The figure in the footage was always filmed from behind or partially obscured by the pillars. No usable frame for identification. The code-operated gate on the 3rd floor had been tampered with, the lock forced with such precision that from the outside it looked intact. Someone knew how to open it without visibly damaging it. The thing I still can't understand is the false name. If he just wanted to get out, the gate was the only way. He needed me to open it, but the false name wasn't about getting out. It was about not being found afterward. I don't know what he was waiting for in those 42 minutes in the blind spot. I don't know what he had in mind when he knocked. I don't know why he settled for just leaving. Those are the questions I still ask myself. I left that job the following month. Not out of fear, I've told myself, on principle. But every time I enter a multi-story car park at night, I never take the lift alone.
Watch this carefully. A young woman steps into a hotel elevator. She presses buttons, not one floor. Almost all of them. The elevator doesn't move. The doors don't close. She steps outside, looks left, looks right, steps back in, steps back out. Then she flattens herself against the inside wall, just out of sight of the hallway, and slowly, very slowly, peers around the door frame, like she's hiding, like something is out there. Then she walks into the corridor and starts moving her hands, slowly, deliberately, like she's talking to someone, but the hallway is empty. She drifts out of frame, and that is the last time Elisa Lam is ever seen alive. The date is January 31st, 2013. The time is 2:30 in the afternoon. The place is the Cecil Hotel, downtown Los Angeles. And nobody, not the LAPD, not forensic pathologists, not the internet, not the Netflix documentary, has ever been able to fully explain what you just watched. But what nobody tells you up front is this. The video is not even the most disturbing part of this story. What the maintenance workers found on the roof 3 weeks later, that's what keeps people up at night. Before we go any further, you need to understand where Elisa was staying. Because the Cecil Hotel is not a normal building. It opened in 1924 on South Main Street in downtown Los Angeles. built by hotelier William Banks Hanner. 600 rooms, marble lobby, stained glass windows. It was supposed to be a luxury destination. It cost over $1 million. It lasted about 5 years as a glamour spot before the Great Depression hit, and Main Street collapsed into what would become Skid Row, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. What followed was a century of documented darkness. At least 16 murders, suicides, and violent deaths inside those walls. 2 confirmed serial killers used the hotel as their base of operations. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, convicted of 13 murders, lived there in 1985, paying $14 a night, returning covered in blood and throwing his clothes in the dumpster out back. 6 years later, Austrian killer Jack Unterweger checked in under the cover of a journalism assignment and strangled 3 women in the surrounding area before being arrested and convicted of 9 murders total. The locals had a name for it. They called it the Hotel of Death. By 2013, it had rebranded part of the building as Stay on Main, budget rooms for backpackers and solo travelers. That's the version Elisa Lam booked. She was 21 years old, a student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. She ran a Tumblr blog, books, photography, travel. She wrote openly about her bipolar disorder and depression, but on this trip, things seemed good. She'd just been to San Diego, posted photos from the zoo. She was heading next to Santa Cruz. Her parents had been nervous about her going alone, so she made them a promise. She would call every single day. She checked into the Cecil on January 28, 2013. She called home on the 29th and on the 30th. On January 31st, the phone went silent. Her parents contacted the LAPD. Police searched the hotel. They found nothing. Her wallet, her ID, her laptop, all still in her room. Elisa herself, gone. Gone, but not without leaving something behind. 13 days after Elisa vanished, on February 13, 2013, the LAPD made a decision. They released the elevator footage to the public, hoping someone might recognize her behavior, her clothing, anything. Within hours, the clip had millions of views. Within days, it had become one of the most discussed pieces of video on the internet. People weren't just watching it, they were obsessing over it, slowing it down, zooming in, running frame-by-frame analysis. Some said they could see the edge of a shoe at the corner of the frame, someone just out of sight. Others focused on the elevator door. Why wouldn't it close? Even when Elisa wasn't blocking it, the doors stayed open. Hotel staff said the elevators were functioning normally. No malfunction was ever documented. And then the theories started, and some of them were not wrong to ask the questions they asked. The theories came in waves. The hand gestures were ritualistic, demonic possession. The elevator malfunction was deliberate. Someone hacked it to trap her. She was communicating in sign language with an unseen accomplice. The government was involved. The hotel was involved. The video had been edited, and if you look at the timestamp jumps, something was removed. Then someone found what appeared to be the strangest coincidence of all. At the exact same time Elisa went missing, Skid Row, right outside the Cecil, was experiencing a tuberculosis outbreak. The CDC had deployed diagnostic test kits to the area. The name of the test, Lam Elisa. The internet collapsed. Conspiracy forums ran for weeks on this single detail. The truth, Lam Elisa is a medical acronym, lipoarabinomannan enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, named for the technique, not the person. Pure coincidence, confirmed by investigators and fact-checkers. But it tells you something about the grip this case had on people's minds. Because while the internet was building theories, something real was happening inside the hotel, and the guests were already living with it. They just didn't know it yet. It started as a pressure problem. Guests on multiple floors noticed the water was weak. Then the complaints changed. The water looked dark. It smelled wrong, organic, slightly sweet, nauseating. Some guests said it left a film on their skin in the shower. A few said it tasted strange when they brushed their teeth. On February 19, 2013, 19 days after Elisa had last been seen alive, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof. The Cecil had 4 large water tanks up there, each holding approximately 1,000 gallons. They supplied water to every floor, every tap, every shower, every glass filled at the sink. He opened the hatch on one of the tanks. Elisa Lam's body was floating inside. She was naked. Her clothing was submerged in the water alongside her. She had been in that tank for 19 days. The guests had been drinking the water, showering in it, brushing their teeth with it, for nearly 3 weeks. The question of how she got in there, that's where this story stops having easy answers. Think about the physical reality of that tank for a moment. The rooftop was not publicly accessible. The staircase door was alarmed and locked. Hotel staff access only. The tanks themselves were tall metal cylinders. To reach the hatch at the top, you had to climb a ladder on the outside of the tank. The hatch opened from the outside. Here is what investigators found when they arrived. The hatch was closed, latch shut from the outside. Elisa was inside. From the inside of that tank, there is no handle. There is no mechanism to pull the hatch closed behind you. Physically, based on the state in which she was found, it should not have been possible for her to be in there with the hatch closed. And yet, there she was. The Los Angeles County coroner performed a full autopsy. The initial finding, undetermined. Months of analysis followed. In June 2013, the ruling was updated. Accidental drowning. Bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing condition. No alcohol. No illegal drugs. No signs of physical trauma. No evidence of sexual assault. No signs of a struggle. 1 minor abrasion on her left knee. That's all. Toxicology confirmed she had taken her prescribed medications, Wellbutrin, Lamictal, Seroquel, and Effexor. But the levels in her blood were, in the words of forensic pathologist Dr. Jason Tovar, interestingly low. She had not been taking them as directed. The theory the investigators built: Elisa was experiencing a severe manic or psychotic episode. When bipolar disorder goes unmedicated, or when medication levels drop too low, the brain can produce states that include paranoia, auditory hallucinations, and terror, a conviction that something is hunting you, even when nothing is there. Her sister Sarah later confirmed that Elisa had a history of paranoia, a feeling followed. The elevator video in this reading is not a mystery. It is a document of someone in crisis, hiding from a threat only she could perceive. And if that's true, if she was running from something inside her own mind, then what she did next was not irrational. It was the only thing that made sense to her. The investigators believe Elisa accessed the roof via one of the hotel's fire escapes. Fire escapes are not alarmed. It's possible. They believe she climbed the ladder on the outside of one of the tanks, opened the hatch, and climbed in, seeking shelter, seeking hiding, seeking whatever a terrified mind tells you to seek. Once inside, in the dark, in cold water, in a sealed metal container, she could not get out. The hatch above her, with no interior handle, would not open from below. She drowned. As for the hatch being found closed, investigators suggest it may have fallen shut on its own weight or been moved by wind. It is not a fully satisfying answer. Dr. Tovar acknowledged in the Netflix documentary that not all background information was made available to the public, and that the internet, without access to the full case file, was working with an incomplete picture. You really don't have the full story in front of you, he said, which leaves one question no official report has ever addressed directly. When Elisa's body was recovered, she was naked. Her clothes were in the water with her. Forensic experts have a name for what likely happened: paradoxical undressing. It is a documented phenomenon that occurs in severe hypothermia. As the body shuts down, the brain misfires and sends a signal of intense heat. The person removes their clothing. They do not feel cold anymore. They feel like they are burning. It means her final minutes were not peaceful. It means she was conscious long enough to feel something she couldn't understand. Her Tumblr kept posting after she died. She had scheduled entries in advance, and they published automatically for months. as if she were still alive somewhere writing about books and art and the places she wanted to see. The last post went live long after she was already gone. The Cecil Hotel was declared a historic cultural monument by the City of Los Angeles in 2017. In 2021, it was converted to affordable housing. It is now closed to guests. Her parents, David and Elisa Lam, never received a complete explanation. The case has been closed since June 2013. Closed, not solved. There's a difference. Elisa Lam was 21 years old. She called her parents every day so they wouldn't worry. She posted photos of zoo animals and bookshop displays on her Tumblr. She had a ticket to Santa Cruz. The official version says she died alone in a water tank, undone by her own mind in a building that had been undoing people for 100 years. Maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe the Cecil Hotel is simply a place where probability bends, where one more terrible thing was always going to occur. Or maybe the elevator footage is still waiting for someone to see what it's actually showing. Either way, she deserved better than an unmarked tank on a roof in Los Angeles, and she deserves to be more than a viral video. If this one stayed with you, subscribe. Every week we go inside the cases that official reports couldn't fully close. Drop a comment. Do you buy the official explanation? Or is there something the hatch being found shut doesn't account for?
In the summer of 2013, Geraldine Largay stepped off the Appalachian Trail to use the bathroom. She stepped just a few yards into the trees. She would have been gone 2 minutes. She never found her way back. Geraldine, Jerry, to everyone who knew her, was 66 years old, a retired nurse and Air Force veteran from Brentwood, Tennessee. She had started her northbound through hike in April 2013, all the way down in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. She had been walking for months. She knew what she was doing. Her trail name was Inchworm. She had a hiking partner, Jane Lee, who had to leave the trail on June 30th in New Hampshire due to a family emergency. Jerry decided to continue on alone, despite what Lee later described as a poor sense of direction. Her husband George would meet her at road crossings to resupply her. The night of July 21st, Jerry camped at the Poplar Ridge Lean-To with 2 southbound hikers, Dottie Rust and Regina Clark. The next morning, July 22nd, Rust snapped a photo of Jerry in her red fleece, smiling and ready to go. Just past 7 in the morning, Jerry texted George that she would meet him the next day as planned. That photograph is the last known image of Jerry Largay alive. Sometime that morning, Jerry left the trail to go to the bathroom. She got turned around. At 11:01 a.m., she tried to text George. In some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR, now lost. There was no cell coverage. The message didn't send. She tried again and again, 11 times over the next hour and a half. None of them went through. She walked west, searching for higher ground and a signal. She only got more lost. By the next day, she texted again. Lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. In reality, she was 3,000 feet from the trail, less than a quarter mile. But in that forest, 3,000 feet might as well be another world. George reported her missing on July 24th when she didn't appear at their meeting point on Route 27. What followed was one of the longest, most expensive search operations in Maine's history. 26 months in total. Wardens, volunteers, canine units, aircraft. On 3 separate occasions, the search dogs came within 100 yards of where Jerry was camped. 100 yards. They passed that close and kept walking. Later, investigators understood why. The tent fabric, combined with the sleeping bag, had absorbed her scent. The dense hemlock canopy above made the tent invisible from the air. The campsite, a medical examiner later wrote, could not be seen until you were right next to it. In October 2015, a forester contracted by the U.S. Navy to survey property in Reddington Township found an old campsite. Then he found Jerry in her sleeping bag, inside her zipped tent. She had died from starvation and environmental exposure. She had survived at least 19 days alone in those woods, possibly 27, writing in her journal every day, rationing her food, trying to signal with fire, listening for helicopters that never stopped close enough. On August 6th, 15 days after she got lost, she wrote, "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now." She was 3,000 feet from the Appalachian Trail and just 2,300 feet from a dirt path that turns into a road, a 10-minute walk from being found. Jerry Largay earned every mile of that trail. She planned, she prepared, she pushed forward for months through weather and terrain and loneliness. And then, for one moment, she stepped 4 yards off the path. The forest kept her. June 14th, 1969, Father's Day weekend. The Martin family had come to the Great Smoky Mountains for a camping trip. Bill and his father Clyde, along with 9-year-old Douglas and his little brother Dennis, who was 6 years old and just 6 days away from his 7th birthday. Dennis was wearing a bright red t-shirt, green khaki shorts, and a pair of low-cut Oxford shoes. He stood about 4 feet tall and weighed 55 pounds. He had dark brown wavy hair and long eyelashes. The kind of detail that only matters later when people are trying to find you. He was last seen at 4:30 in the afternoon at Spence Field. He has never been found. It started as a prank. The Martin boys and some other children camping nearby cooked up a plan. They would sneak up on the adults from different directions and jump out to scare them. Douglas and the others went south and west. Dennis went northwest toward the tree line, planning to circle around and come from the other side. A few minutes later, the other boys burst out of the woods, shouting and laughing. Dennis didn't come out. At first, no one worried. Bill Martin walked the trail west himself, calling his son's name for about a mile before turning back. By 8:30 that evening, the family had hiked 6 miles to the nearest ranger station at Cades Cove to raise the alarm. That night, rain began to fall. What followed was the largest search operation in the history of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, still one of the largest in U.S. national park history. Approximately 1,400 people were deployed across 56 square miles. Park rangers, sheriff's deputies, Boy Scouts, firefighters, volunteers from across the region. U.S. Army Green Berets arrived trained in wilderness tracking. The final cost, $50,000 in 1969, the equivalent of over $400,000 today. On June 20th, what would have been Dennis's 7th birthday, nearly 800 people were combing those mountains. The peak came the following day, 1,400 searchers. They found nothing. No clothing, no tracks that led anywhere. Not a single confirmed physical trace of Dennis Martin was ever recovered from that mountain. He walked into the tree line in a bright red shirt in the middle of the afternoon, with his family just steps away, and then he was simply gone. There is one account from that afternoon that investigators could never fully explain and never fully dismiss. A man named Harold Key was photographing wildlife near Sea Branch, an area roughly 7 miles from Spence Field. Around 7 p.m., Key and his family heard what he later described as an enormous, sickening scream coming from the woods. Moments later, they saw a disheveled man emerge from the tree line, carrying something bundled over his shoulder, get into a white vehicle parked nearby, and drive away. Investigators acknowledged the account and interviewed Key. But they concluded the distance made a connection to Dennis almost impossible. To reach Sea Branch, a 6-year-old would have had to cover 5 miles of roadless forest in under 3 hours. It couldn't have been Dennis walking. No arrest was ever made. The FBI found no evidence of kidnapping. The National Park Service lists Dennis Martin as an open case. His father, Bill, stayed on that mountain for days after his son disappeared, searching alone. Dennis would be in his early 60s now. 12 million people visit Great Smoky Mountains National Park every year. It is the most visited national park in America. On a Saturday afternoon in June 1969, a 6-year-old boy in a red shirt stepped off a trail in one of the busiest parts of that park, and no one has seen him since.
If this one stayed with you, subscribe. On the 1st of February 1959, 9 Soviet hikers pitched their tent on a mountain slope in the northern Ural Mountains, Russia. They were experienced, they were well-equipped, they were university students who had completed dozens of difficult winter expeditions. There was no reason for this night to go any differently than the others. That night, something made them run out of the tent. They cut through the fabric from the inside. From the inside, not the outside, and fled into the snow at minus 30 degrees Celsius. No shoes, no jackets, no equipment. When rescuers found their bodies weeks later, the scene made no sense. Some appeared to have frozen to death, but one had a fragment of bone driven into his brain. 2 had rib cages fractured like survivors of a high-speed car crash. 1 was missing her tongue. Some were wearing clothes cut from the bodies of their already dead companions. And on certain items of clothing, traces of radiation. The Soviet government closed the case within weeks. The official conclusion: a compelling and unknown natural force. Not an accident, not a murder, a force, unknown. 66 years later, no one, no government, no scientist, no investigative commission has a single explanation that accounts for everything. And the most disturbing detail isn't what they found, it's what was never found at all. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old, an engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, now Ekaterinburg. He was the group's leader, an experienced mountaineer and skier who had organized similar expeditions before. What he was planning was not a recreational trip. It was a Category 3 winter traverse, the highest difficulty rating for Soviet expeditions of the era. With him were 8 companions: Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22, Rustem Slobodin, 23, Yuri Doroshenko, 21, Yuri Krivonishenko, 23, Lyudmila Dubinina, 21, one of the group's 2 women, Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, the oldest, a World War II veteran, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, 23, Alexander Kolovatov, 24. There was also a 10th member, Yuri Yudin. He fell ill during the early days of the expedition and turned back on January 28, 1959. It was the last time he saw his companions alive. He spent the rest of his life searching for an answer that never came. He died in 2013, age 75. Their destination was Mount Otorten in the northern Urals. To reach it, they had to cross the slope of another mountain, Kholat Syakhl. In the Mansi language, the indigenous people of the region, that name translates literally as the Dead Mountain. It was not a decorative legend. The Mansi avoided that area. They did not go there. When rescuers were asked whether the Mansi could have attacked the group, the answer was clear. There were no foreign footprints in the snow, no signs of outside intervention. They were alone on that mountain. Whatever killed them, it was already there. And their last night left its mark in the snow as a line of footprints pointing toward the dark. On February 1st, 1959, the group pitched their tent on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was an unusual choice. They could have descended slightly into the forest, sheltered from the wind. They chose the open slope. Experts have debated this detail for decades. The last photograph taken by one of them, recovered from the film reel left in the tent, shows the group setting up camp as night falls. They look relaxed, no visible sign of danger. What happened in the hours that followed has never been established with certainty. What we know is the result: the tent found cut from the inside, personal belongings abandoned within it, and 9 sets of footprints in the snow moving away toward the forest, barefoot or in socks only, heading in the opposite direction from safety. Something made them leave so fast they had no time to get dressed. The question is, what? Rescuers found the tent on February 26, 1959. Over the following weeks, they located the first 5 bodies scattered across the slope between the tent and the forest below. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko were found nearly a kilometer downhill, at the base of a large cedar tree, beside the remains of a small fire. They were nearly naked, victims of paradoxical undressing. When the brain shuts down in severe hypothermia, it misfires and signals intense heat, and the person strips off their clothing, feeling like they are burning. Krivonishenko had bitten off a piece of his own knuckle. He had third-degree burns on his hands and feet. He had leaned too close to the fire without feeling it, because the cold had already killed the sensation. The other 3, Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, were found on the slope at different distances, all in positions suggesting they were trying to return to the tent. Slobodin had a skull fracture, but he died of hypothermia, not from the wound. Those were the 5 that could be explained. The 4 found in May, those cannot. On May 4th, 1959, the last 4 bodies were found in a snow-covered ravine approximately 75 meters from the cedar tree, buried under nearly 4 meters of accumulated snow. Lyudmila Dubinina, 21 years old, bilateral rib fractures, both sides with massive hemorrhage in the right ventricle of the heart. The medical examiner said the force required to produce those fractures was comparable to that of a high-speed car crash. Yet no external wounds, no marks on the skin, as if she had been crushed from the inside, and she was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her upper lip. Semyon Zolotaryov, same rib fractures, same force of impact, eyes missing. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, skull fracture so severe that bone fragments had been driven into the brain. Some were wearing clothes cut from the bodies of companions found weeks earlier. It means they were alive long enough to strip the dead for warmth. It means there was a moment when they were still trying to survive. And then there was the thing nobody expected, the thing that made the Soviet government consider keeping all of it secret. When the clothing recovered from the 4 in the ravine was analyzed in a laboratory, several items tested positive for abnormal levels of radiation. Specifically the clothes of Dubinina and Kolovatov, including Krivonishenko's trousers that Dubinina was wearing. The most likely explanation, according to modern investigators, is that Krivonishenko worked at the secret nuclear facility of Chelyabinsk 40, one of the most classified installations in the Soviet Union, and that his clothing had already been contaminated before the expedition began. Others point to the Kishtim disaster of 1957, a nuclear explosion that occurred in that same region, as a possible source of environmental contamination. In 1959, at the height of the Cold War, the word radiation was not an explanation. It was a state secret. The Soviet government closed the case on May 28, 1959, classified the documents, and banned access to the area for 3 years. Officially, a compelling and unknown natural force. No culprit. Case closed. At least 75 different theories, some serious, some not. The Mansi as attackers ruled out. No external footprints. Soviet secret weapons testing, supported by the classified zone, the radiation, the internal injuries with no external trauma. Infrasound, wind patterns in certain mountain canyons, can generate infrasonic frequencies that induce acute panic, hallucinations, and irrational terror in humans, taken seriously by some researchers. Fireballs. Witnesses in the region reported seeing glowing spheres in the sky that night. Then there are the Yetis, the KGB, the UFOs. The internet has generated all of it. But in 2021, the most credible theory yet arrived from somewhere nobody expected. January 2021, exactly 62 years after the Dyatlov group set out. Johann Gaume of the Snow Avalanche Simulation Laboratory at EPFL in Lausanne and Alexander Puzrin professor of geotechnical engineering at ETH Zurich, published a study in Communications, Earth and Environment, part of the Nature Group. Their thesis? A small slab avalanche, a rare type in which a compact layer of snow detaches from a weaker layer beneath and slides downhill in rigid blocks, may have struck the tent in the middle of the night, injuring those sleeping on the mountain-facing side and driving the others into a desperate flight. The physical model they used to simulate snow, impact on the human body, drew partly from car crash experiments and partly from the CGI software used to animate snow in the 2013 Disney film Frozen, the most realistic snow simulation code available. 3 subsequent expeditions to Dyatlov Pass in 2021 and 2022 confirmed that the area is genuinely avalanche-prone, with slopes exceeding 28 degrees hidden beneath the snow surface. But the avalanche doesn't explain Lyudmila Dubinina's missing tongue. Modern forensic experts suggest Dubinina's missing tongue may be the result of accelerated decomposition. Her body was submerged in the ravine water for months. Soft tissue disappears first. It is biologically plausible. But the original autopsy documents make no such distinction. They state simply, the tongue is absent. And Dubinina was found in a specific position, kneeling against a rock, facing a stream, as if trying to drink or to rise, mouth open. Yuri Yudin spent decades searching for answers. He died in 2013 without finding them. 6 years after his death in 2019, the Russian government officially reopened the case. In 2020, the conclusion was avalanche. Yudin was no longer there to hear it. The area is still called Dyatlov Pass. Hikers still go there every year. Some say that at night, on the slope of Kholat Shakal, you can hear sounds that should not be there. 66 years, no definitive answer. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old. Lyudmila Dubinina was 21. Yuri Krivonishenko had bought a brand new camera for this expedition. Their photographs are still online, taken with that same camera, found in the tent alongside everything else. Maybe it was an avalanche, maybe panic, darkness, cold, and a group of young people making one wrong decision after another in impossible conditions. Maybe the answer is mundane and scientific and has nothing supernatural about it. But the missing tongue, the internal fractures with no external trauma, the tent cut from the inside, the radioactive clothing, the spheres of light in the sky that night, no single theory accounts for all of them, not one. The case is closed, not solved. If this one kept you up, subscribe and drop a comment. Do you buy the avalanche theory? Or is there something on that mountain that science still can't touch? On the 24th of July, 1989, a Hokkaido police helicopter is searching for 2 lost hikers from Tokyo on the slopes of Mount Asahi. The clouds are low, visibility is poor. Then, in a clearing among the trees, the pilot sees something that shouldn't be there. 3 enormous letters on the ground formed from felled birch trunks. 19 trees laid out, each one roughly 5 meters long. SOS. The helicopter narrows its search to the area around the signal. The 2 hikers are found alive, 2 to 3 kilometers to the north. When the rescuer thanks them for the sign, for that enormous signal that had made the rescue possible, the 2 men look at each other. They hadn't built it. Then who? Who had felled 19 trees on a remote mountain, arranged them to spell a word readable only from the sky, and then vanished? Mount Asahi is the highest peak in Hokkaido, 2291 meters, an active volcano at the heart of Daisetsuzan National Park. In the Ainu language, the area is called Kamui Mintar, the playground of the gods. It is a popular mountain for experienced hikers, but it has a trap. On the trail to the summit, there are 2 nearly identical rocks sitting side by side. Turn at the wrong rock and you head down a steep slope into dense forest. into a dead end that is almost impossible to escape. On the morning of the 25th of July, 1989, the police returned to Mount Asahi to search for whoever had built the sign. About 4 kilometers from the summit, they found human bones scattered across the ground around the SOS area. Skeletal fragments with the marks of wild animal bites. No skin remained, only bones. Someone had died there a long time ago. A few meters away, they found a hole in the roots of a tree, just large enough for a person. Inside, a backpack, a Sony tape recorder with 4 cassettes, 2 cameras, a notebook, a pair of men's basketball shoes, toiletries, a skull, and a driving license. The license belonged to Kenji Iwamura, 25 years old, an office worker from Konan, Aichi Prefecture. Iwamura had taken a week's holiday to celebrate a promotion at work. He had chosen Mount Asahi. On the morning of the 10th of July, 1984, he had told the owner of the lodge where he was staying that he was going out for a hike. The owner warned him the weather was unstable. Iwamura went anyway. A week later, he failed to appear at work. His parents reported him missing. Police searched without finding anything. 5 years of silence. And then, bones, a cassette tape, a driving license, and a giant signal that nobody had noticed until the day it saved 2 people who were not him. On the 27th of July, the police listened to the tapes. 2 of them contained the soundtracks of his favorite anime, Macross and Magical Princess Minky Momo. A friend of Iwamura confirmed that he used to record that kind of music. On the 3rd tape, there was something else. A male voice, for 2 minutes and 17 seconds. The message, translated from Japanese, SOS, help me. I can't move on the cliff. SOS, help me. This is the place where I first encountered the helicopter. I can't climb back up through the sasa. Lift me out of here. Sasa is the low bamboo that grows densely on that slope, easy to pass through going downhill, nearly impossible to climb back up through. The police played the tape to the family. His parents listened. They were unable to confirm that it was their son's voice. They couldn't be certain it was him, but everything else was his. Asahikawa Medical University analyzed the bones. The answer was blunt. Female, between 20 and 40 years old, blood type 0. Iwamura was a man. The bones did not match. Police searched the missing persons records for women in the area. They found none. No woman had been reported missing on Mount Asahi. Iwamura was believed to have gone into the mountains alone. The presence of a woman was inexplicable. There was a man's backpack, the bones of a woman, a voice the family didn't recognize, and a sign that nobody had built, and no cutting tool anywhere. On the 28th of February 1990, the Asahikawa East Police Station announced the results of a new bone analysis. Male, blood type A, not female. The police concluded that the bones almost certainly belonged to Kenji Iwamura. Official reconstruction. He had taken the wrong turn, become trapped by the bamboo in the drop, built the death. The sign had already been visible in an aerial photograph from September 1987, 3 years after his disappearance, but nobody had noticed it until that July of 1989. The explanation exists, but the questions it doesn't answer are not small ones. To build that signal, 19 birch trees, each 5 meters long, you would need an axe or some kind of cutting tool. None was found. The autopsy described a person of slight build, probably injured. Experts estimated the work would take at least 2 days in good health. Iwamura was trapped, likely in the early stages of hypothermia. How did he do it? On the trail toward the summit, there are 2 nearly identical rocks side by side. The first, Kinko Iwa, the safe rock, leads to the summit. The second, Nisa Kinko Iwa, the fake safe rock, leads into the forest, into the sasa bamboo that doesn't let you climb back out. Years after the incident, a Japanese television crew filming a report about the story took the same wrong turn. They became trapped. They had to be rescued. The bones were never formally identified as Iwamura's, Police attributed them to him by process of elimination, but DNA was never officially compared against his family's. Kenji Iwamura is still officially listed as missing. The case is classified as a cold case. His 2 cameras were in the hole. The film inside them has never been publicly developed. Nobody knows what is on them. Maybe they show his last days. Maybe the sign being built, maybe someone else. The film exists. The answers might be on it. 5 years of silence, 1 signal, 1 tape. Kenji Iwamura was 25 years old. He recorded the soundtracks of his favorite anime onto cassette tapes. He brought his cameras into the mountains. He hid his belongings out of the rain as if he was trying to keep them safe for when the rescue came. He built, or someone built, something enormous on a remote mountain, hoping that someone would see it from above. Someone did, 5 years later. Too late to change anything for him, but just in time to save 2 people who didn't even know the signal was there. Mount Asahi is still there. The fake safe rock is still there. And the film in Iwamura's cameras has never been seen by anyone. If this one left you with more questions than answers, subscribe and drop a comment. Do you think Iwamura built that sign alone? And that voice on the tape, was it really his?